Welcome to the Boss Audits and Investigations. And thank you for joining me on another episode of the Scientology Chronicles. Today's episode is going to be a part two to episode 13, where we discussed the slain Scientologist William Fisk. And today we're going to go over, I found a couple of other documents after I did that episode, since I've done that episode, where we get the story behind the gentleman who actually committed the unaliving of William Fisk. So we're going to kind of go over, there's two documents that we're going to look at today in this episode, okay? So let's just jump right into this, all right? And I will link episode 13 down in the description. This report was actually written by an FDA agent, and the report was actually written on September 5th. And the unaliving of William Fisk actually happened 5 days later on September 10th. Okay, so this report dated September 5th, 1963. All right. This report is a conversation. It was a phone call conversation with the gentleman, Russell E. Johnson, is the person who unalived William Fisk. And we're going to go through this document first, and then I have another document as well. A call was received on August 27th, 1963, from Mr. Russell E. Johnson. He did not wish to give his home address or a phone number, but said that he would be working on a construction job through September 13th. And the phone number there was 3802. He complained about practices of a Dr. William Fisk, who operates as the Church of Scientology at 4th Avenue in Seattle, and follows the practice of Dianetics. Fisk, he said, uses e-meters in psychological treatment of emotional disturbances. Johnson was aware that the government had seized such devices. He was concerned because his wife had become an ardent devotee of the cult, and Fisk had used his influence to seduce her. At my suggestion, he agreed to attend a forthcoming meeting of the group with his wife and to take more detailed notice of the devices being used. He called again today to say that he had attended a meeting and could give us some further information. I told him I would have an inspector call on him shortly. He said his wife admits going to Fisk for psychiatric help for emotional disturbance. He was more concerned now because she wanted to take their children there. He said he had consulted an attorney and they were determined to prevent it. He said he was no longer welcome at the church because he had openly accused Fisk of using it as a tax dodge. I told him we were not prepared to attempt seizure of the devices at this time, pending hearings on the seizure in the East, but that he would be interested in gathering any available information for later use, either by ourselves or appropriate state authorities. He said that he would be available at the same location through next week. So this phone call took place on August 27th, 15 days prior to the unaliving of William Fisk. So keep that in your mind, and that this report was written on September 5th, 1963, just 5 days before the unaliving of William Fisk. And we're going to take a look at another document that I came across regarding Mr. Johnson here. The date of this report is literally 1 day before William Fisk was unalived. It's dated September 9th, 1963. Okay. In accordance with GWR/ERF assignment dated S- September 5th, 1963, a visit was made to 29th Street South, Seattle, Washington, where Mr. Russell E. Johnson was interviewed regarding the use of e-meters by the above referenced individual. So think about that for 1 second. So this was dated September 5th that they spoke with Russell, 5 days before the unaliving of Mr. Fisk, okay? All right. Mr. Johnson had contacted the Food and Drug Office on August 27th and again on September 5th by telephone and complained about the practices of Dr. William J. Fisk, who operates as the Church of Scientology and uses the e-meters in psychological treatment and emotional disturbances. He went on to state that his wife had become involved with this organization to the extent that their marriage is threatened. Memos of telephone calls are attached or is attached. Background. Mr. Russell E. Johnson is 36 years old, has been married to Norma for 10 years, and they have 4 children, ages 6 months to 6.5 years. He is a carpenter by trade. According to Mr. Johnson, his wife, 33 years old, was a prostitute prior to their marriage. He went on to say that because of the children, he has attempted to save the marriage up until now, but is currently preparing to start divorce proceedings. Administration. For your information, the enclosed clipping reports the death of Reverend Fisk and seems self explanatory. We plan no follow up unless advised. Since dictating the above, we have discussed this case today with Mr. Van Smart and Mr. Arnold Welch in accordance with their advice. We are cooperating with Seattle Police Department in their investigation and are obtaining pertinent material which they have picked up. Report will be submitted later. Mr. Johnson stated that his wife is relatively high strung, but that this condition has become progressively worse. She doesn't seem to have any self control, is easily irritated by the children, and she has beaten and kicked the older boy. At times, Mr. Johnson stated that he has seen her stand in front of a mirror and scream hysterically. According to Mr. Johnson, she is an alcoholic, but will not admit to being one. Mrs. Johnson has been under psychiatric observation by Dr. Theodore Dorpat in Seattle and Dr. Alan R. Donhauer, also Seattle, Washington. And Dr. Donhauer treated her approximately 1 year ago. She has not visited either since that time, and Mr. Johnson has not been able to obtain a diagnosis from either of these doctors in regards to his wife's condition. According to Mr. Johnson, his wife became interested in the organization when she answered an advertisement for personality testing, which appeared in the personal column of the Seattle Times newspaper approximately 12 to 14 months ago, approximately July 1962, at which time she attended a meeting and has since been, quote unquote, treated by Dr. William Fisk, pastor of the Church of Scientology and head of the Personal Efficiency Foundation. Organization operation. According to Mr. Johnson, the Church of Scientology conducts meetings every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday nights from 7 to 10 p.m. at 4th Avenue, Seattle, Washington. These meetings are open to the public and are usually attended by 20 to 25 people. Most of these are members who are called pre-clears. Mr. Johnson only knew the individuals by their first names and was unable to provide a list of the people who attend the meetings. He went on to explain that pre-clear is a term used by the organization for new members who then attempt to work up to a clear, a state of ultimate being, which, according to Mr. Johnson, no one has ever attained. Mr. Johnson stated that the church claims to believe in God, but actually preaches that each individual is God himself. They are also against society and laws and believe that each individual should have complete freedom and self-expression and self-regulation and self-government. The practice of Dianetics and the art of healing by laying on of the hands is taught by William J. Fisk. Discussions pertaining to the above subjects have been given to Dr. Fisk and by a Ron Arnold of Seattle at various meetings. According to Mr. Johnson's diagram of the devices used by the organization is as follows. And you can kind of see his little sketch here even. The device is approximately 10.5 inches long, 7 inches wide, and 4 inches high. The nameplate, which is located on the inside of the cover, contains the following: Hubbard e-meter, made in England. According to Mr. Johnson, there are at least 15 of these devices in use, most of them in mahogany-colored boxes. At least one, which is believed to have been received recently, is in a gray-colored box. As far as Mr. Johnson knows, no drugs are used by the organization. The use of the device is not restricted to any one person or persons, and everyone will use the device one at a time or another. The device is used during the meeting when quote unquote audits are given. Each audit costs between $3 and $4 and consists of the following: working in pairs. One individual known as an auditor will adjust the device as per Dr. Fisk's instructions and will ask the other, who sits holding an electrode in each hand, a group of questions which has been prepared for him by Dr. Fisk. These questions may and do pertain to anything which may have happened to the patient. The auditor observes the tone arm needle. If the needle rises and falls evenly, the device is said to have cleared itself. If any sudden movement up or down of the needle is observed, there is a question as to whether the device has cleared itself or not, and if the patient is telling the truth. Mr. Johnson claimed that he is able to clear the device even when he gives an erroneous answer. Every 10 minutes during a 2.5 hour session, an audit, the reading of the tone arm needle and the tone arm dial is recorded on the list of questions. Dr. Fisk then prepares the next list of questions for the patient using this information. After 2.5 hour session, the individuals trade places and the first auditor becomes the patient, and then the first patient, the auditor. A person can take as many audits as he wishes or may take as intensive session, which cost $350 and consists of 5 5-hour sessions. These sessions are given by Dr. Fisk himself. Mr. Johnson stated that he had never taken an intensive session and didn't know what it consisted of. According to Mr. Johnson, a member, after taking an intensive session, can then take an advanced session known as the HCA, the Hubbard Communication. Mr. Johnson didn't know what the letter A stood for, which is given by the Church of Scientology in Los Angeles, California. Cost of session is $800. Mr. Johnson stated that Dr. Fisk has never told his wife what is wrong with her. His only remark has been that she looks better now than she did when she first came down. Mr. Johnson feels that his wife's condition is becoming worse, and he questions the activities and practices of Dr. William J. Fisk, who he doesn't think is either a bona fide doctor or a reverend. Mr. Johnson stated that he was aware that the Food and Drug Administration had seized some e-meters and wondered if he could do anything in regard to their use by Dr. Fisk. The inspector repeated the information given to Mr. Johnson by Supervisory Inspector G.W. Reinerson on September 5th, 1963. Attached are two pieces of literature and the contents of a letter sent to Mr. and Mrs. Johnson by the Church of Scientology of Washington State. These items were identified by Mr. Johnson with his initials and the date of September 9th, 1963. Mr. Johnson stated that although not entirely welcome at the church, he would try to obtain additional pieces of literature and send them to us. My office card was given to him at this time. Mr. Johnson stated that he could be contacted through his lawyer, Benjamin Asia, Tower Building, Seattle, Washington, if necessary. Edward R. Floyd. Well, it sounds to me, in all actuality, I don't know what triggered him to do the act of unaliving William Fisk on September 10th, 1963. I don't know what the actual trigger was. I do have another document that I have found. I have not been able to get through the entire document, but it is concerning his case, and what they charged him with and that type of thing. So we're going to get to that, and that'll be another episode all by itself. And but the sad part to me is that it's like he knew something was wrong, right? He knew that. I mean, come on, your wife is going for these quote unquote sessions, these auditing sessions, and yet still coming home and screaming into a mirror hysterically and hurting her children. She's not getting any better. So I don't know what currently, I don't know what the actual trigger was for him to commit this act. But I think the part that bothers me is that he was asked to go in there, like go and check it out and give us some information. So he was kind of doing this in a covert way to assist the FDA in their investigation. And because all they wanted was the information at that time, all they wanted was the information on the e-meters. So I don't kn I don't know. This one's a little weird for me because I feel terrible because this is, again, another family destroyed by Scientology, resulting in the unaliving of a Scientologist, and the FDA had a hand in this one. They had a hand in this one. They had numerous communications about 15 days before, 5 days before, and then the day before the unaliving happens. So the FDA does not come out clean on this one. Not at all, in my opinion. Tell me what you guys think in the comments, and look for part 3 coming soon. And remember, guys, kids cannot consent. No more kids in Scientology. Please remember to spread love and kindness wherever you go, and I will catch you on the next one.